Okay, hi everybody. So this is my take on the Color of Law video we had to watch by Richard Rothstein. One of the main things that surprised me in this video was the fact that when he touched on the public housing, like today society views public housing as just for like low income families, minorities, those that are just lesser fortunate, which is the case today. But the public housing actually began in the Great Depression, and it was for middle class families, families with jobs, families that could afford rent, but houses were not being built during the Depression. So the government built these houses specifically for these families, and over time they had just turned into something that is perceived as negative, even though that's not how they started. So that was probably one of the main things that surprised me. So for the second question, what do I know about my own community and local zoning policies during the 20th century? So I think my community growing up was a pretty integrated community. I don't believe it to be segregated at all. That's not to say that the surrounding communities weren't maybe considered segregated, but my own personal community was pretty integrated, and it did have its fair share of middle class, low class, and moderate income housing. I have friends that were middle to higher class. I had friends that maybe did live in the low income government housing. So I think it was a very integrated community and still is. But like I touched on a little bit, the surrounding communities may not have had that. They weren't very integrated. They were more segregated communities, like the Hudsonville or Jenison or East Grand Rapids, which like surrounded my community. But like I said, my specific community was a very integrated and very diverse. So for question 3 about the two sides of the story, if there was anything missing from the Color of Law, I don't think there was anything necessarily missing. I do wish it touched a little bit more on the income gap today, because I know it did say like that the African American incomes are about 60% of white income today, but I wish he touched on that a little bit more, and I'm not sure how much that would have changed the argument. I think it would have just added on to the argument and proved more points. But I do, however, wish that it touched on that more. I would have liked to know more about that. It was just kind of like a little blurb, and then it didn't like mention much more. So yeah, definitely the income gap would have been interesting to know more about. So back to like my community and my school for question 4, it was not racially segregated at all. Every friend group was very diverse. Everyone was very inclusive. We celebrated like all different, like we had things all around the school for Black History Month. We had things all over the school for like Lunar New Year, like everything you could think of. We were very inclusive. Women's History Month, everything. So we even had clubs. Like we had like, I don't know, so many different clubs just based on diversity and inclusion. So my school did not have little to none interracial friendships. Like there were plenty everywhere you looked. Like all of my, like I had few friends that were white, and but that's not to say I didn't have any. They were just very diverse friend groups, very diverse friendships, and everyone talked to everybody. So that was my personal community. But consequences of missing out on cross racial friendships, it can lead to being ignorant. It can lead to just knowing less and being less socially aware. I had a really good friend in high school who was Bosnian, and I would go over to her house, and her parents didn't know much English, and it just was really eye-opening. Like, my friend has to be their translator for everything when they're out in public, and it was just like, I don't know how fortunate I am that I don't have to do that, but also what a gift it is to be like, to know more than one language and to go back to their home in Bosnia, and it's just like things like that. So it was just really eye-opening, and I was very fortunate to have those experiences. So yeah, there's a lot of consequences of missing out on cross-racial friendships, especially ignorance. One thing I would like to better understand about my community is the I want to know more about why my community is like dead in the middle of like communities that are less fortunate than us, and then communities who want nothing to do with diversity and are still very segregated. I just want to know why like my specific area is not like that. It's like the perfect mix, I think. And not to say like I don't know, that just might have sounded wrong, but I just want to know why like my community is surrounded by so much negativity and why mine was so good. So that's one thing I want to know. This isn't necessarily an unanswered question, but I know towards the end of the documentary, Richard stated that the segregation we have today has enormous consequences, and it's the underlying cause of a lot of social problems we have today, like and health disparities, the police brutality against young men, and a cause of the very dangerous political polarization. That's exactly what he said, and I just want to know more about the political polarization aspect of it, because everything else seems to like make sense to me. And I know he also stated that the political polarization isn't 100% racial, but I want to like touch on that more and why political polarization could be so affected by this. Yeah, I don't necessarily have a question for it, but I just want to know more about the political side of it. And yeah, that is all for my video. It was really eye-opening watching this documentary and The Color of Law. So yeah.